This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest quarantine episode of the Cabal cast. There have been some updates in Magic related to what's going on in the world, so that's definitely one of the things we're going to talk about today is what that means. Ikoria was delayed. The other topic we're going to touch on is liquidity right now. Feedback, personally from us, as well as some vendors that we've spoken to and what they've said their marketplace kind of looks like right now. So let's get started there.
So the initial bit of news came late last week on the 26th. I'll bring this up. There is a change to the release of Ikoria. We initially thought that this would be a play-at-home pre-release as of, I think it was not quite a month ago, but that was basically all we had, and a lot of uncertainty because a lot of things were in flux. So right now, the dates have pretty much kind of been solidified, and the waves of release set forth by WotC. Also in this announcement is the second wave of mystery boosters that are going to go free direct to LGSs, either by...
They finally did something for the LGS. Good job.
So if the blurb is to be believed, like I said, there will be no cost to the LGS. They're just free to sell these. So, but that's awesome. My only question is if they think LGSs are going to be closed until May 15th, how are you supposed to sell these? But I guess online sales have to be the way to go.
Yeah, it's got to be the only thing you can do, which is going to suck because that's every LGS competing with every LGS in the country.
A little bit, yeah.
At that point.
As far as the Ikoria release date change goes, within... It's not even the US, it's like... the Americas, Europe, and a fair chunk of APAC are going to be moved almost a full month back to May 15th.
Yeah.
How it was determined that those areas specifically compared to Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong still being mid-April is interesting to me.
I think it's because the Chinese printers are being used for Ikoria, if I had to guess.
Okay.
So they can print them there and just release them and not have to worry about shipping.
Delays.
Whereas if it was the European printers, then Europe would get it on time and most of the other people would be delayed. That's just my guess.
No, that makes sense. I didn't think about shipping delays. I mainly thought about it, if they're paying attention globally to what is and isn't locked down and for how long. That also makes sense because different areas are handling things differently. The thing that stands out about that delay, to me, also is this could mean a lower adoption of sealed product by players because they have to wait essentially until the end of April to get their product.
Yeah.
And why is that? If LGSs are slated to do their pre-release and their releases on May 15th, that's because Amazon is currently stocking Ikoria and has a release date of April 24th for everything. And if there might be a delay just for the release compared to the sale at the LGS level, but this looks like give with one hand, take with the other. LGSs get mystery boosters, but they get hoisted by Amazon on Ikoria release.
Yeah. The thing that's also interesting to me is it doesn't say anything about the set's legality. The date the set is legal and if that changes based on the release, because it'll create a lot of pressure on Asian vendors or APAC vendors if they're the only ones with singles product. Especially because, being international at that point, they can kind of charge whatever they want to and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, Amazon stock isn't distro stock, so we don't know how much is going to last on Amazon to feed the US market or the European market, etc. Yeah, so it could just be upon the shoulders of the APAC vendors to really fill that gap.
Yeah.
Also, a Moto and Arena get it a full month early as well, so that kind of curtails paper adoption, at least in the delayed markets. It is the Thursday before the the Asian release, so April 16th versus the 17th. So that again puts interesting pressure on the paper market, regardless of who is supplying. What is the draw going to be like? And with this delayed release, Star City might actually be able to start scheduling events now. But as you suggested, with the legality being so fluid right now, we don't know who's going to be able to do what.
Because if the set's still legal on the original date of April 24th?
Yeah,
I believe was the original date. That's going to be. I think that's bad for LGSs and good for the big guys. Your Star Cities, your cool stuffs, your card kingdoms, the places that get a really steep cut like Sports and More style on wholesale, and then open hundreds of boxes for singles because they're the only place that has them then, and you need them right away. So that you're not going to get them on TCG because TCG doesn't have overnight shipping. Whereas, or next day or 2 to 3 day, whatever. Not always, anyways. And you can guarantee that Cool Stuff, Card Kingdom, Star City, Channel Fireball from their direct website, Miniature Market, places like that have that shipping option available. So I think that's another way that they're kind of, through no fault of their own in this case, sort of taking away from what the LGS gains out of this. Because like mystery boosters are cool, but they're also kind of dead now.
They're from everything we've heard, they're still a blast to draft. People love that format, the idea of that format as a whole, but the singles market has definitely cooled. So buying a box even at close to $200 and reselling for a profit almost is nigh impossible to do right now unless you spike that box and you're doing player-to-player sales on Facebook or some other direct platform like that. So it increases the difficulty. And it's interesting as well because the pre-release and the release are stacked up on the same weekend so that stores can buy WotC contracts, sell everything that weekend. So an LGS can't bust and sell singles because technically, unless something changes in that contract, they're not able to. Those cards are technically not legal the way things stand right now. And who knows, this could shake out a little more and this could change. But right now, the LGSs that really only do these release events are the ones that are going to suffer and make standard environments fairly interesting. And prices are definitely going to be way out of whack for a while because of this.
Yeah, it's also interesting thinking like in terms of what will define staples. When you think about the metagames of the different areas, you talk about like Shota, how he always attacks the metagame in a very certain way, and how certain tech, happens in the APAC region, certain tech happens in the European region. The metagame, if the legality doesn't change, is going to be defined entirely by the APAC play style, which is going to be interesting, I think, because you'll also have like, extrapolating from that, like your 95s, your Haruriyas, those are going to be the models that people are going to look to for what to price their singles at release. They're not going to do like, there's most of the big vendors actually talk to each other about how they're going to price singles. You're going to have such a big lead time now with your Japanese vendors, your Chinese vendors, your Taiwanese and Hong Kong vendors that you're going to have to kind of go off their model. And that's going to be interesting to see if anything sort of slips through the cracks and you have some stuff that, might not seem like it's incredibly busted at first. I'm looking at you, Oko. And all of a sudden, by the time the product's available, we know what it is. So. Yeah,
and that pricing holds strong and moves through the secondary as well, and it causes ripples there coming out of APAC region, because oftentimes you're able to jump ahead on tech and pricing if you pay attention to different regions as metagames shift through the world, depending on where the next event's going to be or where certain people are traveling and going to be able to display what they're doing.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a wild ride for this set. And there are a lot of questions that, a lot of small things that add up to big in the end that we just have to wait for. Are they going to print this set longer because of the delay? Will there be more available at the start than previously anticipated and things like that? And that could also affect the pricing of singles it not adversely, but differently than it has in the past. There have been sets that have sold out on release weekend, and you just couldn't get any more for a week or two. You had to wait for the next distro order. Well, people are waiting for this set. They have nothing to do right now besides mystery boosters. If that really does cool between now and the middle of May in these regions that are delayed that long, does that create more of a fervent opportunity for people to really just buy this set out? And if they don't overstock, does sealed go up and singles prices follow accordingly because nobody can get their hands on what they need? And it's going to create an interesting marketplace for sure. And this is one of those things that we'll continue to talk about because this is still in direct reference to the COVID-19 fallout and event pausing, cancellation, etc. So as things change and we get a better idea of the landscape, we want to talk through this so that everybody's prepared and able to do what they need to financially, either for gain in regards to holding product or just to be able to pick up what they need for sale. Or not sale, sorry, for purchase and personal play. So.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is, we've at this point we can basically assume that core is actively being printed.
Yeah.
So if there's a production delay, we're probably not going to see it until Zendikar. So if the precedent has been set that we are able to delay sets for reasons like this, whereas, Darksteel, some of it got lost, whatever, that's fine. Are they going to further delay other sets? And will that create, at what point do you delay sets long enough that you're like, all right, this is just our new release calendar now?
Yeah, it could throw things off.
Because at this point, we have 2 months between set release. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of time for a meta to establish itself within that timeline. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, too, because, there's... Again, this is completely unprecedented, and it's interesting that in a faith-based market, a faith-based economy, that no one, and I'm not sure I disagree at all, no one is saying that, this makes Magic a less viable product. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think that this does make it a less viable product by any means.
Nope.
I just think it's interesting that no one is even mentioning it as a possibility.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just going to come down to see what WotC wants to do. I mean, they have a suggested price for all of this stuff, that starts at distro and trickles down, and they also have the opportunity to turn the knobs if they want and change things, and not change distribution patterns, but maybe change how things are bundled in the future, and maybe they fire sale Ikoria just to get it into the hands of players, or purposefully overstock Ikoria in various aspects. The 2 month timeline to really kind of hammer out a metagame lends itself a little more to how they want to handle their tournament structures moving forward, and maybe they move with a format that doesn't really change a whole lot based on standard releases, and put in a bunch more modern in between Ikoria and Core, or Ikoria and Zendikar, and just dot the landscape a little longer with modern.
Yeah.
And then maybe weave in some Pioneer to try and help people out a little bit in regards to card acquisition and pricing of what could be a short-sold standard format. But I don't know. Like I said, a lot of this is just kind of us waiting and circling around WotC and hoping that they get to us as players and people who enjoy this game the information that we need to really be able to take advantage of this.
Yeah.
Short of that, you'll be able to continue to jam everything on Arena and Moto if you want, but that doesn't really replace the paper aspect of the game once we're able to come back and actually start enjoying it.
The other interesting fallout from this, kind of bridging into the next topic, is how liquidity has changed in singles. Because for me, Modern, Standard, Legacy are like, I used to pay between 60 to 65%. I'm paying 20% now because it doesn't move. Nobody wants it. Everybody's dumping it for just fire sale prices because people are out of work and they need money. And it's not that I'm like trying to take advantage of them at all. I'm one of the few people in the area that's actively buying still. It's just that I'm going to sit on this stuff indefinitely. unless it's EDH, which thematically Ikoria feels like it could be an EDH set. So you may see that some of the singles are a little bit more liquid out of this set. I don't know what it's been like for you, but it's been mono EDH for me in that set.
Yeah, I mean, basically all the LGSs have been down for almost a month now, so it's been kind of barren up here. I was talking to one of the individual vendors up here who provides singles for one of the stores, and she does kind of like flea market style stuff up here, as well as sales on TCG, and has had nothing. The area has been dry for the last couple of weeks, and that includes Facebook Marketplace for the state. So she's actually going to turn to Craigslist and see what's going on there, because that's fairly active in our state, in our area. And it's interesting. I know people still play EDH. I'm in a number of groups, so I do get those notifications when people want to just jam on Skype. But nobody really seems keen to pick up anything, and I have yet to see anybody looking to sell anything, which is actually a little more surprising for me. I thought by now I would definitely see some modern collections go up, and I would see some people trying to get out of larger EDH staples, but not because they need to get rid of their dual lands or the cradles. They don't believe in that kind of stuff, but it's because a lot of people here just don't live paycheck to paycheck, essentially. And so what I expected to see is what I'm seeing in larger Facebook groups as well, which is you can sell anything you want in any of those groups and somebody will buy it as long as you price it properly. But at that point in time, you are going to take a beating on this stuff, on the high-end stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
That's kind of been my experience with my online sales lately. Is if it's not EDH, it's not moving. There's plenty of vendors that are still buying. I mean, like we said, 95 launched their buy list right before this, and it's still there, and it's still the same prices, which is interesting. They have not tanked their buy prices. If you're looking for online buy lists, most of them have shut off now, with the exception being Cool Stuff, who actually increased the credit bump they're offering during this time period. So, like, Card Kingdom was on delay 72 hours, and they reduced a bunch of their buy prices. Star City is offline. Channel Fireball is up in the air still. TCG Direct is down. So any of the vendors that thrived specifically on Direct are off the books. And Cool Stuff bumped their credit and didn't really drop any of their prices, which is interesting.
I noted in the middle of the week, because I got a little bit of code that I've tossed out to our patrons that pulls out the Card Kingdom hot list to make it digestible. They have moved almost exclusively into EDH territory, so they have pulled back on a lot of their high-end stuff. It was noted earlier in an almost predatory buying video from a YouTube personality saying that because Card Kingdom pulled back on a lot of their alpha and beta power prices, or even stopped buying them at all, that this was the end of an era, so to speak, and markets would come crashing down. That's incorrect. They pulled back to refocus their buy list. So looking at this hot list, Ixodor Reality Sculptor is on here. Painful Quandary, Platinum Empyrean, Whip of Erebos, Deranged Hermit, Necromancy. Stuff like that is on the Card Kingdom buy list. Bribery, Swiftfoot Boots is on here. That is an EDH list. So we are still seeing people keep their buy list open but refocus too, and that's super important. But that also goes to show that EDH is still a very liquid format. The only thing that I've seen up here, and it seems in general be a liquid, are just kind of like low-hanging standard staples. Like nobody can move anything that isn't immediately playable anymore.
And it's playable in a casual setting, because those are the games that are going now. If you're a grinder, if you're trying to like make it, you're on Moto and you're on Arena. You don't need paper cards. So it's got to be your casual stuff.
Like I said, Card Kingdom does have something like there's Robber the Rich and Embercleave on here, but that speaks more to the Pioneer side of the buy list because Nykthos is also on here. So while not a casual format, some
Yeah.
of those cards do overlap. Ember Cleave is going to go in your EDH equipment decks, but they are kind of preparing for a Pioneer Surge afterwards and stuff like that. It's not like...
Yeah.
But Ember Cleave isn't a low-hanging standard staple anymore, or it never really was, so to speak. So that's really what I'm seeing when it comes to liquidity. Like, I'm personally holding a lot of my stuff because I really culled my Modern collection down to playables. I'm not sitting a lot of overstock. But I'm not unhappy to be sitting on all my EDH specs, because a lot of those are still moving in a positive direction, and the majority of what I'm tracking is still holding strong and basically just roping according to Echo, because that's what I use instead of a TCG inventory.
Okay.
So, like, the game's not coming to a grinding halt. The financial aspect of this game is not going to fall out from underneath you. What we're seeing now when people are just dumping higher end specs or entire decks, large collections, are the people that need the money now, not the people that can't afford to hold on. And that's a very important distinction to make. You know, it doesn't speak volumes about somebody that has to fire sale their cards, but there are bills to pay in a time period where people aren't making what they used to, and they might have dumped a lot of money into these cards and were going to build themselves back up afterwards, but they got hoisted in the meantime, and now they need to get rid of this stuff. So don't take illiquidity of a number of aspects of this game as something that says things are coming to a grinding halt. No, different people, different situations, and you need to be mindful and understanding of that there are implications, yes, but it doesn't mean that we're done.
Yeah, it's just much more. It's a shifting of the model, which, you know, again, you just have to adapt, and you're fine. It just has to, you know, you shift to what you're invested in. The whole thing as a vendor is you want to hold on to cards exactly long enough to turn them into cash or more cards. So if that means you operate on thinner margins for a little bit, you operate on thinner margins. And that's fine. That's just how you have to do it. But that's basically what it's shifted to now. It's not the traditional model, you know, people who thrived on GPs are obviously having to change up. Your LGSs are obviously affected, which, you know, I'm very glad that they threw in the arena event as like a bone to the LGS while they're closed. Hey guys, you can host a arena event for $10, which I participated in and didn't even play.
Nice.
But yeah, I think stuff like that's good, but the model has changed. The market has changed drastically.
Yes. Absolutely. And, you know, this is a time where if you have to sell out because you need to make ends meet, that's perfectly fine. If you don't, that's also fine. But take this time, this kind of drought, and figure out how you want to move forward in finance.
Yeah.
I guess the end on that. I don't know if we can really say much more than that.
No.
Again, this is something we'll talk about as well, because eventually there will come a time where if everybody's stuck inside and you can't get out there and you can't move cards, the idea behind what's happening in the marketplace will change, and there might come a time where you know, certain aspects of this game will falter and fall away, and we'll be there to cover it.
Yep.
So
that's stay tuned for an update. Right. But in the meantime, picks.
Right. I want you to go first because I had no idea what this card was, so I think it's way more interesting than mine.
Okay, so I went for Elvish Lyrist, the foil promo from way back in the days of 2001, when life was simpler and we had another national crisis take hold. This was handed out as part of the Junior Super Series. So the reason I picked this is, one, it's a star foil. I love star foils. Two, the card is like less than $2. It's the only foil printing of the card. And if you've noticed, some of these older promos have kind of started drying up lately. There's a 7th edition foil, but I believe that's a different art, if I'm not mistaken.
7th and 8th.
Yeah, 8th is New Border. That's not a star foil. Doesn't count.
Yeah, fair.
But As these older promos have sort of started to dry up, I've tried to take a look at some of the lower hanging fruit that exists there, and see, all right, so what can we do? I mean, obviously you have the City of Brass JSS is worth, $100 or so. The Crusade is worth, 9 to 10. Well, you look at the old like foil disenchant and stuff like that. That's just over the last 6 to 8 months started ticking up gradually, and in some cases has exploded. And this seemed like a low-hanging fruit with good utility and decent playability in the EDH. It's, a universal green effect in an incredibly relevant tribe because elves are all over EDH. That's just how it works. And I think that, honestly, at about less than $2, I don't even know how many copies we can get for that price on TCG, but it's quite a few right now. There's a vendor with 6 of them for 50 cents each, with $2 shipping, granted. But
you're buying up, it evens out, yeah.
Yeah, I think that seems fairly affordable, considering I could see this card with like a $4 to $5 buy list eventually, especially if it gets bought out and it spikes. That's when you can capitalize on, assuming they're there, the buy lists that tend to react a lot more quickly because of like spikes, like Card Kingdom type stuff. And I think that's probably your out here. Hold on to maybe a playset or two, for the homies, so you can hook them up if they need it for EDH or something. But by and large, that would be my out. And I'd say, honestly, if it doesn't spike within the next 6 to 8 months, at the cost you're in on it, you're fine holding on to them, probably.
Yeah, I think you're fine. There are a lot of these JSS cards that are just kind of sitting at like $1 or $2, right around the same price. It really seems like the floor is currently set by Slith Firewalker as an uncommon. Regular printed uncommon. Everything else is a little bit more than that. Even Volcanic Hammer costs about $1.50. But aside from City of Brass, which has utility outside of EDH, we have seen the growth in our time working in this industry of the Elvish Champion and the Glorious Anthem. Now, granted, these are junior APACs, which is why they have a several $100 price point. But we have watched this stuff grow over time. And the floor on a lot of the other cards in the JSS series that aren't APAC is at least $2, aside from Two-Headed Dragon, which is $9. So you can expect this card to tick up over time as these things disappear from the market. At the end of the day, though, like you said, your out's going to be most likely a buy list. You're not really going to find somebody who is hunting specifically for the stuff unless it's EDH or a collector of the Super Series stuff.
Exactly, that would be the other one.
Alternatively, if you wanted to make this market yours, there is the opportunity to just wander in and buy a lot of this stuff and pump the price yourself. You can definitely do that. Lord of Atlantis is on here for $20 or $20-ish. Sarah Avatar, Royal Assassin, these are those last two are about $10 each. You can definitely make this market yours and corner a lot of it if you want to move in and throw some money at it, which isn't a bad idea because oftentimes in a narrow market like this, you are paid dividends.
It sticks a lot.
You are paid dividends when that floor rises. You just have to want to allocate the funds for the period of time it takes, and then the amount of space. So you're just tying up capital and space. So,
but it's such an easy in, like I said, and like you said, if you want to corner the market on it, you can do it for like $100 on some of these cards. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the kind of thing where population is small enough where it might make sense more to do that rather than just buy a few copies. So there's definitely multiple strategies you can take here, and most, if not all, should be viable. Also, don't underestimate the fact that the card self-sacrifices, which is kind of important in EDH if you're going to work within Golgari or Green-Black X. Putting a creature in your graveyard and triggering any number of effects is always worth a minimal investment, and for one to play the creature and another one to sacrifice it, you're at minimal effect there. So keep that in mind. Another reason why it's a decent pickup. My spec goes in a different direction. This has been a card I've been looking at personally for a while, since before War of the Spark. I picked up a bunch of Aether Snaps as just kind of a thought experiment at about 25 cents each because nobody really had any of them. And then War of the Spark details came out, and it's going to be a Planeswalker-based set. And myself, like a number of other people, thought, okay, well, when Planeswalkers take over EDH, because they'll all be bonkers, even down to the uncommons, this card will rise up, as it only has 2 printings. Darksteel
Yep.
and Commander 2014. So it absolutely did. Market price drove it up to about $1, and then average just never really caught up, and it came crashing down in about March. So why move on a card that has both shot up and then came tumbling back down? Well, thanks to Mark Rosewater, we know there are going to be at least 12 different types of unique counters in this set. And regardless of whether or not it's a counter that gives a keyword ability, like Trample, for instance, this card gets rid of all of them. It gets rid of all counters, regardless of what they are, and ends Planeswalkers, as well as creature tokens as a bonus, right? It costs 5. It slots in perfectly. It costs much less than Inguruk's Wake, and just houses a board. Now, with this card, you look at, okay, it had a main set printing in Darksteel, and it had an EDH print in Commander 2014. Well, and it's kind of funny that you mentioned it, Darksteel had an issue when it was being stored, and a good chunk of that set was destroyed. So, cards from Darksteel are inherently more rare than Mirrodin or Fifth Dawn, just based on the fact that there was that error or issue ahead of time. Commander 2014 is the monocolor deck commanders. Those are extremely difficult to find. Highly opened because they are great, but difficult to find. And the market is drying up on them. So, you have a card that's essentially was bulk up until about War of the Spark, shot up to $1, and now the price is reset back down to about 60 cents, which means that if you got in early enough, you're already up on this card. My initial out was going to be buy list, but those are pretty much all dried up right about now for something as casual as this, so I gotta wait a little longer for Ikoria to come out and then people to see renewed interest in this card. Something else that I found interesting while I was doing my research for this was that the floor on this on TCG Player, while it might actually look like it is about 40 to 50 cents at the individual vendor level, when you start filtering for quantity greater than 4, you start to get a lot of stores that have these from 60 cents to $1, and there are only a few that have them at 60 cents, and then it goes to over $1 very, very quickly. So as the low-hanging fruit disappear, the market value is just going to jump inherently, just because that delta is going to close. This is a card that if you have the ability to move in on, I would go in on in quantity, like just bulk buy, because this card is going to get better and better as things go on, and the only thing that's going to disrupt the price is going to be a main set printing, i.e. standard, or a supplemental set printing in a master set. But the more they go back and reprint additional types of counters, unique type of counters, or they make cards like Doubling Season better, a card like Aether Snap is just going to kind of survive and be a decent hold over time. I don't really see this card coming back in a standard set. It would have to be something inherently counters based like Ikoria, and after this opportunity it just kind of disappears. It made sense back in Mirrodin because everything put a counter on everything, and there were a ton of different types between modular counters and things like Darksteel Reactor, which had its own set of counters, etc. That it made sense there. So if it's not in Ikoria, then we are just off to the races on this card. And if you're able to get in now at somewhere between 40 and 60 cents, then an easy out should be when this card hits $1.50, $2, etc. in the future. So.
And I think, highlighting again the casual aspect of it and the fact that it spiked when counters and planeswalkers were a thing. Like you said, once we hit that spot with Ikoria, it's inevitable that it's going to spike again, similar to when I picked Clark's Thumb a couple weeks ago, and I was like, hey, anytime there's a coin flip, this card spikes. So if any time that X happens, Y card A spikes, well, it's going to happen inevitably. So if, counters that give trample and stuff, like you said, are a thing, of course it's going to spike. It might not stick, but if it spikes and you can out it on a buy list, or you can out it for half of the spike on Facebook, which, pro tip, if you sell it for half of the spike, say you only have a playset, even if you have 100, because people won't buy from a filthy
Yes,
speculator.
but
Personal experience, just throwing
but you
that
can
out
send
there.
out as many play sets behind the scenes as you have. So easy
Yes.
peasy. You're absolutely. I like the inner workings there. That's great. The other thing I want to mention is, and I mentioned this on our quick hits that I put out this weekend. This is the card that does its job the best. It is not the second best. It is not the third best. It is the best at what it does.
Yep.
So when you have a unique effect like that, it is synergistic with what you're doing, or it works well against your community, your table, what's coming down the pipe in terms of EDH releases. That card is going to be worth money. Look at Training Grounds.
Yeah.
Training Grounds is the best at what it does. There are two other options to play, Hearthstone and Biomancer's Familiar. And Training Grounds is the best at what it does. That is why it costs over $20. Rarity from Zendikar, never been reprinted, etc. That aside, it is the best. Hands down. So,
Pretty great.
I think that's going to be it for us this week. But we will be back at some point next week. Hopefully, after an April 2nd announcement from WotC and the Ikoria video, we'll have a little more to talk about in regards to upcoming mechanics and some interesting picks based on that. But until then, I am at Halt, I am Reptar. You are...
I am at Thirsty
We
Sizzler.
are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter and Patreon and Facebook. And as we keep asking, we don't care about the like or the subscribe, but please leave us feedback so we can continue to serve you guys better.
Yep. Thanks a bunch, guys.